Now bringing into the fold Dave Richard and Heath Cummings, our fantasy experts. Of course, you guys are always on top of all the movements. First, Dave, your reaction of hearing about the Browns signing Kareem Hunt.
A shrug. That's it. Because, listen, I know the name Kareem Hunt is very familiar in fantasy circles, and at one point he was an RB1 for fantasy managers, but he's not the same guy now. And the Browns have made it clear that Jerome Ford is going to be their #1 back, their feature back. And honestly, he deserves the chance to go out there and get it, Zach, because in college at Cincinnati, over 2,000 total yards, 15 touchdowns, something like that. I think it was actually the other way around. 1,500 total yards and 20 touchdowns in his last year with the Bearcats. And he really just hasn't had an opportunity to play in the NFL because Nick Chubb was on the field. And who are you going to take Nick Chubb off the field for? Nobody. But now the Browns don't have Nick Chubb. Ford's got the opportunity to be the lead back here. Look at Kareem Hunt as like a handcuff. I think that's how the Browns are looking at it. Maybe eventually he gets in the neighborhood of 10 touches a game. But for now, it's not going to happen. This is Jerome Ford's backfield.
So let's say if you have added Ford, is there any cause for concern when you see that Kareem Hunt has been added if you're a fantasy owner?
I said shrug. I've got no concern about it as of now. Now, if Jerome Ford goes out there and over the next couple of games, tough matchups for the Browns. If he stinks in those games, do the Browns think about making a move there and putting in Kareem Hunt? Look, I have a hard time believing that because Kareem Hunt was on the free agent market for months. He visited with like 4 other teams. He had to wait for Nick Chubb to get hurt and then go back to Cleveland and then try out for Cleveland before he signed with Cleveland. So I think he might be behind Pierre Strong on the depth chart for week number 3. I think anybody that buys heavily into Kareem Hunt is just living on past memory, and that's just not the way to view Kareem Hunt at this point in time.
I certainly do not want to invest heavily in Kareem Hunt. I do think that he probably provides just a little bit more risk to Jerome Ford than, say, a Pierre Strong would. I think Kareem Hunt, a more known thing in the passing game and in pass protection. What you wonder is, does this turn into an 80-20 split, a 90-10 split like it was when after Chubb went down last week? Or now that Hunt's there, is it a 60-30 split, a 65-35 split? I would be a little bit concerned if I just spent 80 or 90% of my fab on Jerome Ford. But I still think he's going to be a low-end #2 running back and the clear top running back for the Browns.
Yeah, a lot of people were certainly wanting to pick up Jerome Ford. I know that in my league, he was the first person taken off of the waiver wires.
Of course.
Very excited for that. Let's go from running backs and now look at the wide receiver position, Dave. How are you thinking things are shaping up there? Who are you targeting right now?
Well, I think Josh Reynolds is the guy that was the most added in CBS Sports leagues overnight, and I think he'll continue to be. He's still out there in over 50% of leagues, and we're talking about the guy who's the #1 downfield receiver for the Detroit Lions. This is a big deal because Amon-Ra St. Brown, yeah, he's still the target leader, has the highest target share in Detroit, but Reynolds is right behind him, and he's running further routes downfield. His ADOT's higher. He has more explosive plays than Amon-Ra St. Brown. It's a little surprising when you think about who it is, but it's not surprising given the offense that's happening here. And there is a chance that Josh Reynolds has staying power for the rest of the season to be at worst a #3 wide receiver or a PPR flex. There's been 7 games that he's played in Detroit where he's seen at least 6 targets. In 6 of those 7 games, he's delivered a floor of 12 PPR points. You go into every week thinking that Josh Reynolds will give you at least 12 PPR points. You will be a happy camper with this guy on your team.
I'm definitely more excited about Josh Reynolds this week than I am Tank Dell, but I'm pretty excited about Tank Dell for the rest of the season. Very excited that the rookie, in just his 2nd career game, leads the Texans in target share, has 10 total targets. And the reason it was 10 total targets wasn't necessarily the target share. Sure, 23% is very good for a rookie, but they are letting C.J. Stroud sling it. And I don't think that defense is stopping anybody this year. So he may throw 35 to 40 attempts per game, which leaves room for both Nico Collins and Tank Dell to be potential PPR starters in your fantasy league. Right now, I'd view Dell as more of a boom-bust flex option, but I do think a couple more weeks of this type of involvement, we could see him in that top 36 ranking range.
We move over to quarterbacks now, and for me, Dave, this one is interesting because I have Joe Burrow, so I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do in that situation. I have Deshaun Watson on my bench. When we talk QBs, where should folks be looking?
I think you need to take a look at Jordan Love, and I know that he's already been rostered in the majority of leagues. In fact, Matthew Stafford was added in more CBS Sports leagues overnight than Jordan Love was because Love was already rostered in a bunch of those formats. He's been putting up really good numbers without great efficiency. efficiency. He's been off target a bunch, but I think there's still room for him to improve. Certainly he can throw more on-target passes, but he's playing well for Green Bay. Without his #1 receiver on the field, Zach, Christian Watson is going to change the dynamic of this entire offense when he does come back. The fact that Jordan Love is doing well now makes me encouraged to go and acquire him on the cheap while he's still cheap if I've got concerns about Joe Burrow, if I've got concerns about Justin Fields, if I've got concerns about Anthony Richardson or Deshaun Watson. We thought there'd be a ton of quarterbacks that would be fine when we were drafting. Turns out that it's not that way. So Jordan Love is someone that fantasy managers can go and gravitate toward as a cheap trade option in 1 QB leagues, 2 QB leagues, forget about it. People that have him, they're going to be starting him every single week, and I still think the best is yet to come for Jordan Love.
Love is going to be one of the guys on my watch list this week because I am very skeptical of that fantasy production. So touchdown heavy. Dave mentioned it. The off-target throws, he's had more of them than anyone in the NFL. Another guy I'm a little bit skeptical of, but he was on that most added list. It's Matthew Stafford. And I think you look at the raw counting numbers for Matthew Stafford and you think, oh, he's back. He doesn't even have Cooper Kupp yet. He could be incredible by the time Cooper Kupp shows up. You look at the efficiency numbers for Matthew Stafford, and they look a lot like the guy that we saw last year, which wasn't really that great. The main thing that's propped up his fantasy production to this point has been the fact that the Rams are running more offensive plays than anybody in football. So Stafford's already thrown 93 passes in 2 games. He's not going to come anywhere close to that pace the rest of the season. He's still a #2 quarterback, but for me, he's a low-end one until Kupp gets there.
Dave, let's say you need some help at tight end. I could use some of that as well. So
the majority of fantasy managers could.
Yeah. Everything you're saying here, where do we look for help there?
Well, Hunter Henry's already become the popular flavor of the week at tight end, and I think he's worth talking about because I think he's actually a sell-high candidate. The fact that he's been touchdown reliant each of the first 2 weeks of the season, that helps his cause. Certainly the fact that he's got that 10 PPR point floor because he's had at least 5 catches each of the first 2 games, that helps him out too. But I don't like the target share that I've seen from him in New England, and the Patriots have made it clear that they're willing to throw the ball around quite a bit and use a lot of different wide receivers and tight ends in the mix. They also haven't had a game where they've played with a lead. In those games, I don't think Mac Jones will throw that much, and that'll hurt Hunter Henry, might turn him into more of a blocker than a pass catcher. So we might have seen the best of Hunter Henry. So for someone like you, Zach, who wants to go and get another tight end to try and shore up that position, I don't mind Henry this week as a starter, but I think that if you've got him, you picked him up off the waiver wire, see what he does this week, and then try and sell high off of him because I don't know if this is sustainable.
And Henry's pretty much the only waiver wire ad that I would actually start at tight end over some of those struggling starters. But there is a guy that I would like to add and put on my bench if I have the roster spot. And it's usually young guys we do this with. But for me, it's Zach Ertz. He actually leads all tight ends with a 30% target share over the first 2 weeks of the season. And that's something, if you look at Joshua Dobbs, his very limited track record, he has thrown to his tight ends a ton. Now, it hasn't turned into production. As you can see here, I don't think it's going to turn into production this week in a terrible matchup against the Dallas Cowboys. But if he maintains that type of target share, I do think that Ertz could turn into a low-end streamer, at least until Kyler Murray comes back.
So, of course, on the opposite side of